This is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess Jamal. I'm Jess Jamal.
And this is Jamal Dajani.
Well, Jamal, welcome back. We're so glad to have you back in studio with us. You have been Arab Talk correspondent all through Europe. You've been in Greece reporting. You've been in Spain reporting. And you're back here. So welcome back. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. And we should have a great show as usual. And we've actually done quite well reporting from Europe. And you were here in San Francisco just, because of the simple technology that we have. And then a big shout out to our editor, Matt DeVries, for helping us out. Otherwise, we would not have been able to do it without him.
None of this could happen without our production guru, Matt. So thank you, Matt. But Jamal, as usual, I refer to you as the Arab Forrest Gump because every time you go somewhere or leave, something happens. We have a lot to talk about today, and I'm going to leave towards the latter end of the show to get your analysis of the European perspective on what's happening here in the United States. But the biggest news that's happening today is among all of the things that President Trump has done to betray the United States, among all the things that President Trump has done to foment racist, white supremacy, and racist attacks against people of color, he has hit a new low. And we're just getting breaking news that Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib and Congresswoman Omar have been denied entry. Now, let's remember this. They are congresswomen duly elected by their districts, and they have been denied entry into Israel on a fact-finding basically peace-enhancing mission for these two congresswomen. They have been denied entry. Now, the thing that makes this especially egregious, problematic, and in my humble opinion, a threat to U.S. interests, you have the President of the United States calling Benjamin Netanyahu, asking him to deny two U.S. citizens and two U.S. congressmen legitimate legal entry into one of our so-called allies. In my mind, Jamal, this turns out to be not just one of the lowest points in the Trump administration, but among the biggest threats to democracy, to the presidency, and to what we know based on the Constitution of the United States.
And let's give it some context, because let's start from Trump's Twitter and what he tweeted early on this morning at 6:57 a.m. this morning, and I'm just reading from his Twitter account, and this is what the President of the United States tweeted. It would show great weakness if Israel allowed Representative Omar and Representative Tlaib to visit. They hate Israel and all Jewish people, and there is nothing that can be said or done to change their minds. Minnesota and Michigan will have a hard time putting them back in office. They are a disgrace. This is what the President of the United States tweeted about members of Congress to a foreign nation.
To a foreign nation.
This is. People are not seeing the severity of the issue. In fact, I would say many people are seeing it, including, and then we'll talk about this because, Jess, guess what? For the first time, AIPAC criticized Trump and Netanyahu.
Oh, that's right.
They were against it. They said, well, we're against Representative Omar or whatever, or we don't agree with their views, but the action, they were against, and I'll read that tweet from AIPAC, which is unprecedented, that elected members of the U.S. Congress are denied entry to a country that has received more than $150 billion of hard-earned U.S. taxpayers' money. More than $150 billion, which, by the way, are approved by Congress. Every year, U.S. aid is approved by Congress. And they've denied members of Congress from two different states entry. Well, that's why now there is even, this is backfiring,
Well,
and
there-
we'll talk about the
well,
people who have been criticizing it.
well, yeah, but in addition, it's not only AIPAC, Jamal, that has been critical about this, but Kevin McCarthy, who is the leader of the Republicans in the House of Representatives. He's the most highly ranked member, the leading ranked member of the minority in the House of Representatives, happens to be in Israel today, Jamal, with a delegation of Republicans. And even Kevin McCarthy, who leads the Republican effort, who's, in the Congress, said today that he felt like Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Congresswomen, should be allowed to come. So even Kevin McCarthy has been critical. AIPAC has been critical. Chuck Schumer has been critical. All these devotees and supporters of Israel's apartheid policies on both sides of the aisle, I might add, Jamal, Republicans and Democrats, have been extremely critical. So here's my question.
Which, incidentally, how many members of Congress have just visited Israel?
31.
I mean, the 31, of course, they were, the only thing I look at it, these are what I call them Hasbara trips supported and funded by AIPAC, usually so they can, according to Israel, it's so people can see for themselves. That's what they say, to come and see for themselves. But they are very organized, very orchestrated Hasbara trips. And Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, along with her group, they are going on a different way. That's why this got denied, basically. But also, Israel, just a couple of days ago, said, this is from their foreign ministry, they said that they weren't going to deny it.
They said they were going to okay it, right.
So until Trump tweeted about it, Jess, until he decided to kind of basically egg Benjamin Netanyahu to deny them, according to Israel, and then we'll get also into talking about this, he basically, the government changed its position on this and came up with nonsense. So there is a bunch of tweets we can read, including a tweet from your favorite friend, Marco Rubio, who said that he disagrees 100% with Representatives Tlaib and Omar on Israel, and then he proudly says that he is the author of the anti-BDS bill we passed in the Senate, but denying them entry into Israel is a mistake. So even Rubio is against it, because this is going to have a serious repercussion.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is a precedent because other countries can retaliate. You can use this precedent, to do that to any member of Congress, really.
That's right. Well, here's my question, Jamal. In whose interest is Donald Trump working? In whose interest, as President of the United States, is Donald Trump making decisions about what is in the best interests of the United States of America? Based on what he said, his inability to criticize Putin of Russia, based on his inability and reluctance to put sanctions on the Russians, which, we're going to talk about at some point, maybe today, maybe on another show, in his inability to criticize what's happening in Hong Kong right now with a brutal crackdown on the pro-democracy movement that's going on in Hong Kong right now. You have a president of the United States who calls a foreign leader, a leader who is practicing apartheid policies, who's engaged in mass incarceration and, some people would argue, committing war crimes against Palestinians, calling this leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, and asking that he deny entry of U.S. citizens, congresswomen, to that country. Whose interest is he working for, Jamal? Is he working for the interests of the United States or some other interest? This, as I said before, among all the really bizarre decisions that he has made that have fomented racism, that have fomented hate, that have fomented xenophobia, this to me is a new low in terms of what Donald Trump has done.
Well, I mean, you could also add to it just that this also is a ploy and a clear attempt to pit Jews against Democrats.
Yes.
Because he's playing that. This is another thing. I mean, he's using this whole political ploy and split the Democratic Party, pit Jewish voters against the Democratic Party by showing them and say, look, I'm more Jewish than you are. I have the interest of Israel more than anyone else,
more than American citizens.
And he's just like, this is really a desperate attempt, in my opinion, and a distraction for all the things that we've been seeing here. You know, the economy is tanking. You know, the stock market has been hammered. The our relationship with China is at its worst, and he's creating basically an economical war between the United States and China, affecting all our interests overseas and American companies, not just Chinese companies.
Well, I think that's right, Jamal. I think part of this is a big distraction. I mean,
We've had more than 250 mass shootings in the United States, and the year is not over.
Yeah, more than one a day.
More than one a day,
More than one a
including just within the past 24 hours, an attack on
6 policemen.
Six policemen.
In Philadelphia, yeah.
And all the investigations and all the connections from all these Trump good people that he was going to hire. Some of them are serving time in jail. His connection to the Epstein, we don't know until we get all the information about the mysterious death of Epstein. I mean, if you look at all these things, they just don't add up, Jess. And then all of a sudden,
but they do
he
add up,
he hijacks the 24-hour news cycle.
Well, I have
to basically
take attention away from
take attention away from all these ongoing investigations.
Well, I think that's right, Jamal. But I think his calculation has failed because no other topic has unified Democrats and Republicans than what he's done against Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar by calling a foreign leader and asking that these congresswomen be denied entry. It has unified Republicans and Democrats. And what it also is going to do, and this is why he is not the sharpest knife in the drawer, it's going to bring more positive attention to the plight of Palestinian inclinations, drive, desire for freedom and self-determination, Jamal. What this is going to do is put the Palestinian issue front and center, as it should be, in the Democratic platform. And with the skillful work of Chuck Schumer and some other people, they've been able to marginalize that in the presidential debates. This is going to bring it full circle yet again. It is a miscalculation, again, by this president. It is deeply, I think it's fair to say that it's deeply Islamophobic. It's sexist, it's Islamophobic, and it's xenophobic for him to target these congresswomen who are duly elected.
And it doesn't serve the interest of Jewish Americans in this country.
Of course it doesn't.
I mean, he is manipulating this whole platform. And then the irony of this, Jess, and this is a reminder, this is a man who in 2015, and I'm quoting, told a room full of Jewish Republicans, if you remember, that you're not going to support me because I don't want your money, right. Adding that, you want to control your politicians, that's fine, right? This is what he said. In 2016, he released a campaign ad that played a quote from one of his speeches over footage of George Soros and former federal chairman Janet Yellen, who's also Jewish, a visual that comes across as anti-Semitic dog whistle. This April, he told an American Jewish audience that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was their prime minister.
He told Americans.
You remember that?
Yeah, he told
Remember
Americans
he said their prime minister, implying that American Jews have a dual loyalty to Israel, a worse version of the controversial comments once Omar, according to him, said about the pro-Israel lobby. So,
but I do.
So we know what he, because you started by saying, this is the lowest moment. I don't think it's the lowest moment. I mean, how low can this president go?
Well, he's going to go a lot lower, Jamal, because we're going to talk a little bit about this a little later in the show. And of course, he can go even lower. But I'm saying since he became president, we're now well into the second year of his presidency. Well into the third, starting into the third year of his presidency. Of course, he could go lower, but this is the lowest of the low. This should be a wake-up call for every single American, irrespective of Republican, Democrat, progressive, conservative, evangelical. It doesn't matter. You have someone in the White House, Jamal, who does not even put the interests of the United States of America first and foremost. We saw that with the Mueller probe and his inability to criticize Vladimir Putin for his interference in our elections. He is unable and incapable of confronting thuggery all over the world and thuggery directed toward this country. So people need to wake up that this is a person who's got his finger on the nuclear button, who is arguably the most powerful person in the world, supposed to be committed to the U.S. interests, is now putting Israeli interests over American interests.
And to be fair, monitoring the Israeli media, they had also a different look at it.
What was their look?
Because many politicians, pundits, and so on, that I was reading their quotes, they're criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu as being a puppet
of the United States
and Donald Trump, and that his action is going to basically ruin the goodwill between the United States, between Israel and the U.S. Congress. Any which way Netanyahu tried to kind of spin it, saying that we respect the United States and the American people and the U.S. Congress, and then he tried to single out. Of course, he singled out Representatives Omar and Tlaib, but many politicians in Israel, many journalists there, are really shocked by this action because they are looking into the future, saying, you know what, this is a precedent because we've always allowed all members of Congress, even Congress members of Congress who were critical of Israel, we've never shut the door in front of their face. But this action could have a repercussion in the House. Because remember, every single Israeli prime minister, and the last one, if you recall, when Benjamin Netanyahu came to the joint session, walked in like a hero without an invitation from the President of the United States at the
That's
time,
right.
Barack Obama, a slap in the face of Barack Obama. He was welcomed like a hero. Well, now you have at least half a dozen members of Congress who are unhappy. And I'm not saying there are more, but I'm talking about the visible one, like OAC and Presley.
But I think it's more than a half a dozen.
And others that who might, the next time, might turn their back. This would be a simple message. When the Prime Minister of Israel walks into that room, they might just leave or walk. I mean, this is the easiest thing they can do.
Doesn't Jamal Benjamin Netanyahu understand that it's Congress that signs the check for their foreign aid to the Israelis? It's not the president that signs the foreign aid checks, Jamal. Congress is the body that is designated in the Constitution to handle the budget and signs off on these things. The president can direct it, but, he's basically slapping and biting the hand that's feeding the war machine, that the Israeli military and government gets this money, this free money from the United States. They're biting the hand that feeds it. It's really so disturbing on so many levels that it's hard to imagine.
Well, I mean, it's definitely, Israel's decision to ban Tlaib and Omar, Representatives Tlaib and Omar, from entering the country is a big slap in the face to both the American government and the idea, and this is the unmasking of this idea that Israel is a tolerant and pluralistic democracy. So in one, this is, I would say, the other side of the coin. It really unmasked on the international level,
Right.
not just like this, including members of Congress who are now embarrassed because they come back, they go to Israel, they go on this Hasbara tour, they walk them and say, look, Gaza is not under siege, we are under siege. They take them, look at these Katyusha rockets that they are attacking the Israeli innocent public. Of course, they don't talk about the F-16s and the bombing and the death of children in Gaza and the starvation. They don't show all of this. And then these guys come back and they say, wow, Israel is a democratic country. And then, of course, they bring a couple of Arab-speaking Israeli politicians and they say, we are in an inclusive society. They don't show them that just a couple of days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu gave the green light for the extremist colonial settlers to go right in the middle of the Eid prayers to antagonize Palestinians, accompanied by Israeli military.
Right.
They don't show them these things: women being hit and beaten, and blood on the faces of those worshippers. And then they come back and say, Israel is a democracy. Look at this.
So here we are. Let's contextualize this, Jamal. The only democracy in the Middle East, that's the Hasbara brand that Israel likes to say, is denying U.S. Congresswomen access and availability to enter. The greatest democracy in the Middle East, the only democracy in the Middle East. So Congress needs to wake up and understand this fiction, not of Israel being a democracy. It's a democracy if you happen to be of a particular faith, but if you happen to be a congresswoman who is Muslim, who has Palestinian roots or Somali roots, whatever, but are a U.S. citizen and a member of Congress, your ability to criticize is going to be denied.
Plus, they're going not alone, by the way.
No, they're going with the whole
group of progressive Democrats who don't see eye to eye with the rest of the platform of the Democratic Party. They are willing to examine and look at things and not give Israel a wink and a nod and look the other way as they commit their atrocities towards Palestinians. And, which, by the way, think about it this way. I mean, you can talk about this for hours. Just the other day, and maybe I'm free associating a little bit here, just.
You're jet lagged, it's okay.
Yeah, I saw a tweet by former Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. And she was basically saying, bravo to the demonstrators in Hong Kong. They are demonstrating so they can see freedom and whatever. And I'm like, what? I mean, here is a former Secretary of State and an almost president egging on the citizens of Hong Kong or citizens of China living in Hong Kong to keep demonstrating. And she never said anything and never praised Palestinians demonstrating against their oppressors.
Never. She calls them terrorists.
Exactly. And so this is, again, it takes you see all these things and you see the clear hypocrisy in these actions.
No, but it's more than just hypocrisy, Jamal. This is flat out racism. It's a kind of racism regarding democracy that only certain people are either worthy or entitled to democracy, not everybody. This racist, hateful, xenophobic trait that some people are okay to fight for freedom and democracy, but others are not, is really, unfortunately, what most of the Democratic Party has been about, most, if not all, the Republicans. And, of course, Hillary Clinton is a perfect example. You know what, Jamal? It's a very simple analysis. You either believe in democracy for all or you don't. There's no gray area here. You either believe firmly, unequivocally, that all human beings have the right to democratic freedoms, a right to self-determination, a right not to live under the boot of an oppressor. You either believe that or you don't, Jamal. It's not selective. But what the Democratic Party has gotten away with, is this idea that, yeah, democracy is okay, but not just for everybody. And this is why this issue of denying Congresswoman Tlaib and Omar entry is going to force this issue of Israeli aggression, Israeli apartheid, and the fiction of Israeli democracy. It's going to put it front and center.
And there is a more dangerous precedent. And I go back to what at the beginning of the discussion, Jess, because this creates a fake concern, right? And, there is this kind of, from Trump, that he created this fake concern about anti-Semitism and an attempt, again, this is an attempt to divide American Jews from Democrats. And I think this is...
It's not going to work.
It might, I don't know, but this is really dangerous. And pitting American Jews against American Muslims and vice versa, playing this game, and basically, splitting the country.
That's what he wants. But that's exactly the plan. That's the plan.
In a country that is split between white, black, Asian, etc., and we're seeing these racist and white supremacist attacks, slaughters, more than 250 mass shootings in less than a year, and then so he's adding more fuel to this fire of hate, saying he's calling, like he knows more than basically all the brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith, and saying, look, we're denying, Israel must deny them because these Muslims, they hate Jews and because they criticize Israel, and conflating the criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And this is a very dangerous precedent coming out of the mouth of the President of the United States.
You're listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. We're streaming live on the KPOO website at kpoo.com. We're also streaming Facebook Live right now. If you go to Jamal Dajani 2 on Facebook, you can see that we're live streaming. And, of course, we're podcasting this, and we'll be posting it later. Yeah, I think that's right. But, if I don't like doing this, Jamal, but I'm gonna take a minute here to kind of put aside the racism, put aside the xenophobia, put aside the hateful, disturbing, crazy rhetoric just for a moment, and want to talk about Donald Trump's political calculation. Donald Trump can only win a second term as president if he gets as much of his base out as possible. He's looking for as many people as possible who fit the Donald Trump base mold. Extremely conservative, evangelical, white, who believe in his principles, that we're being invaded by brown people, from the southern border and from the Middle East. And he has a calculation that if he attacks Muslim women, even if they're congresswomen, that's going to get even more of his base to come out. This is the only way he can win, Jamal. Mm-hmm. So from a political calculation, in his little mind, he actually thinks that trying to galvanize his base against this decision, which is hurtful to the Congress, which is hurtful to this country, which serves the interests of another country, will help rally his base even more. I actually think this could be one calculation that is actually going to work against him.
You're also forgetting to add to this calculation, splitting the Democratic Party, taking away the Jewish support.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that'll. I don't put that as part of the calculation. It could be, but I think that the Obama calculation, Jamal, was bringing people together, and that's how Obama won both times on a landslide.
And the youth.
And the youth, right. And
mobilizing the youth.
2008, 2012, that's how he won. Trump can only win on a plan of xenophobia, hate, guns, and division. And he is hoping that the only thing he could do is kind of wear Democrats out so that they don't come out to vote. People didn't come out and vote for Hillary Clinton for all the reasons that we talked about endlessly for a year, for 2 years. And he's hoping that the same thing will happen now. He's attacking Joe Biden. He's attacking Elizabeth Warren. He's attacking Kamala Harris. He's attacking all of the front runners. And he's going to wear people out, hoping that people will give up and not go to the polls. He's also hoping that his buddies in Russia will undermine the election also. But this is his only calculation politically in order to win. I think I mentioned this to you before we went on air today. I have a statistic about the demise of the Trump presidency. It's the number of Republicans who begin to disown him or distance themselves. We had a major Republican surrogate distance himself this week, and that was Anthony Scaramucci, the former press secretary. It's kind of a big deal. He's been going on.
Well, he knew how to milk it, but I don't know if he is an influencer.
But
and
a couple
I agree. For example, with
a couple of congressmen have also done it. So you have people for the first time, Jamal.
You have this, but I don't think his
and 12 Republican congressmen have decided that they're not going to run for re-election.
Yeah, that's a different story. But I think his Republican, and that's his base, the hardcore MAGA hat wearing, they don't see it this way. They don't care what happens. They actually will attack those who attack him from within the Republican Party. And we've seen how he basically castrated the Republican Party and all the members, including Rubio and others, who he basically during his presidential elections mocked, and now they all line up to kiss his ring, right?
Right.
So I don't think I don't think that the politicians within the party count. They'll affect congressional. They'll affect congressional. But what I think will affect it, and will be, if how long those who were disenfranchised, those who stayed at home, the youth that Barack Obama mobilized, the African American community, the Arab American community, the Muslim community, the Latinas or Latinx who just decided not to go out and vote.
They will vote this time.
That if they go out in droves, because this is, after the last elections, to tell you the truth, I stopped putting any faith in polls.
You can't.
Because all the polls were saying, Hillary was going to win. And all the polls before that were saying that his, the momentum will eventually end up with him when he was running for the Republican primaries. And soon the Republicans will circle their wagons and they will elect one of their one of their own, because they looked at Donald Trump as not one of their own. He was the odd one out there. And then he kept going, and he won the primaries. And then all the polls were showing Hillary winning. So it's all nonsense. It's really about the last 6 months. And maybe there is one thing that really works, which is very important, and we haven't talked about it, which is the economy.
Bye-bye.
And the stock market, that expression, the economy is stupid. I do believe in this phrase that maybe not now, but comes 2020, in the first or second quarter, if we see a second quarter of 2020 by next August, next September, what we're seeing today, this uncertainty, he won't win.
Yep.
That's one. But then the other factor, which is the popularity factor, if you don't mobilize all the disenfranchised groups, if they continue bickering and splitting against each other, and this is the ploy he wants to now get the Muslims against the Jews and the Jews against the Muslims and whites against blacks and blacks against whites and all this game. If this works, he will win. But if they unite and they see this man the way that you and I see him, the way that if you look at him in the clear, that this man bankrupted how many companies, how many casinos?
Well, let's say
how many airlines?
He
even bankrupted his own so-called university.
Jamal, he's had at least 4 or 5 personal bankruptcies.
So he will
Business
he will
bankruptcies.
bankrupt the country if they can see clearly that if we continue on this path, he will bankrupt this country. If we continue on this path, he will basically roll the clock back to
Jim Crow.
Jim Crow.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to say what I'm going to say next, Jamal. Okay? We've given our listeners a very clear, compelling analysis. But you remember my predictions. I still believe Donald Trump has more than a 50-50 chance of being reelected for another term. And I'll tell you why. I just want to add a little specificity to something you said, which was the polls were wrong. But a more accurate statement would be the polls were right and the polls were wrong. Because Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote by 3 million votes.
That's true.
So the polls did accurately reflect and predict the general election vote. Where the polls failed, and this is where you're correct, is in the complexities of the Electoral College and this Byzantine, if I can use that word, archaic, slave owner driven, system of the Electoral College. He was able, based on about 50,000 votes in 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, he was able to eke out an Electoral College victory, even though he lost the popular vote.
But he won, if we go by the electoral victory, he won handily.
Oh, beyond handily.
It wasn't even a close one.
Well, because
if he knows how to play, this is a chess game.
Right.
If he knows how to play this, like Donald Trump couldn't care less about the votes in California. He knows he's not going to win California. He couldn't care less. He only cares about his these states and others, his core states, his core supporters, and as long as the only way like Barack Obama won in these states is because he was able to mobilize the youth,
the vote.
He was able to mobilize the African American community and other minorities. And this is how you can defeat it. If they stay at home and then just moan and groan and complain about him, but then they don't go out and vote, then he's going to win.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's why I think, and I have said, and it was one of my predictions, that, in fact, there's more than a 50-50 chance. By the way, Jamal, do you remember one of my other predictions?
Which one?
We
you
would
had
go
many
in,
predictions.
I know.
Then I'm going to call you a prophet soon.
That we would go into a recession.
That's a horrible prediction, but I think you're right. I think we are heading that way.
So I want to talk about a few things. We're going to follow this story on Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, congresswomen who were denied entry at the behest of the President of the United States to deny 2 American citizens and congresswomen calling the leader of another country and asking them to deny them entry. We're going to follow this story, but we have a couple of other stories that we need to follow too right now. I want to just speak a little bit about the economy, and then I want to, kind of talk a little bit about gun violence, because these are all going to play in the general election. In terms of the economy, Trump's narcissistic fiscal policy, which basically says, I'm going to put tariffs on on Chinese-made goods, and we're going to squeeze the Chinese, and the Chinese will fold, and we are going to come out as winners.
And we're going to get all the jobs back.
Jobs are going to come back.
In the United States, the coal industry, the car industry.
Well, I have breaking news.
You're from Detroit. Did you see the car industry coming back?
Well, actually, just the opposite. In one of the Trump states, Ohio, Jamal, GM has closed 2 major plants. And the automotive industry in Michigan continues to be in decline. We are just hearing from the major automotive, car makers right now that their inventory right now of 2019 cars is at an all-time. They can't give away cars right now. We have an economy. If you're a farmer in this country from the Farm Belt in the Midwest, Jamal, you're hurting big time. if you're a business owner and you rely on just, either selling, trading, buying, or selling things from China, your economy is going to tank. I have breaking news for all the people that voted for Donald Trump thinking that it was going to improve the economy. We are a hair's breadth away, Jamal, from a deep global recession. A hair's breadth. And whether or not Donald Trump can magically make it go away, or whether another reduction in the interest rates by the Fed is going to change that, is unlikely. So everything that you and I have said in terms of the political analysis may pale in comparison to what's going to happen to Donald Trump in 2020 if this economy tanks the way it looks like right now.
Well, again, going back, it's the economy stupid expression, which is true.
I don't want to be right about this, but I think we may be going into a recession.
Well, what we've been seeing has all the signs of a recession or a crash or something like this. It's very unusual. And I'm not an expert on the economy, but when you have a stock market that drops 800 points, then goes back up like few hundred, then Donald Trump puts something on Twitter and then drops again 500 points. It means there is this instability that he has created with the whole issue with China.
Instability is the key.
It's a very jittery and very unstable. And then sometimes I feel he does these things. A lot of analysts said, well, he's ignorant. But no, I think he does these things. There is more thinking behind it.
Absolutely. I think
because for one thing, maybe you and me and the average people are not making all the money, but somebody is making money, because even when you have these huge fluctuations, there are people who buy and sell, and we're having these huge fluctuations. You know how long it takes for the stock market to go 800 points? Let's say even at this rate. Takes few weeks. We've seen it within the past 2 weeks going up and down like this, just in less than
it's unstable.
In 2 weeks.
It's unstable, yeah.
So there is a big spread for those the day traders, people unlike you and me, who are investing in the millions and billions of dollars. So when you buy low, sell high, and whatever at the end of the day, and then buy again, whatever, somebody's making money.
And it's not.
And it's not Donald Trump voters. I guarantee you that.
It's not.
It's not those people who he promised, jobs and the return of the auto industry and the coal industry and whatever. But somebody else is making a lot of money during that time.
Well, I just want people to realize, who voted for him, that if you voted for economic reasons, you better pay attention. There is a group, though, that doesn't care about economics, Jamal. His core base, they care about one thing. They care about stacking the judicial system with as many conservative judges as possible. And as long as Donald Trump is the president, and the Senate is controlled by the Republicans, I'm going to use some very strong language. Maybe I won't, because I know certain people are listening. But it's a fantasy of the conservative elite, of the evangelicals, to have a 7-2 majority in the Supreme Court. So if Donald Trump gets another 4 years, you have Justice Ginsburg and Justice Breyer, who everybody has been saying are likely to retire in the next presidential cycle. That theoretically could give the Supreme Court a tilt, 7 conservative against 2, and then 6 more years of conservative judges changing the face of the judicial system.
For the next 30 years minimum.
That's right.
And that's their thing is...
That's their thing, and that's
it's an appointment for life.
And that's more important, Jamal, than money.
So for them, it's more important to ban abortion.
It is.
To reverse... Wade,
Brown versus Board of Ed, Roe versus
Wade,
Roe v. Wade.
All these things. It's more important than having stability and peace. And of course, they don't care about any gun control. As we're keep seeing every week and every few days people are getting killed. This is a country that has more guns than human beings.
Yes, and it's not video games. It's not mental health, Jamal. It's every country has video games. Every country has mental health struggles. The only difference between the United States and every other country in the world, full stop, is easy access to weapons of war.
You're listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. We have a few minutes just left.
And I wanted to listen, Jamal. You have a perspective. I mean, you've been traveling in Europe, and you've had a chance to really speak to Europeans in Greece and in Spain and other places, and get a perspective of the European perspective on what they see politically going on in this country. And maybe, I mean, I'm interested in this. How do Europeans see the craziness that's going on here?
Well, I think the biggest shock and maybe the biggest discussion about evaluating or looking towards the United States is the big question about gun control and about guns. And people are really shocked and surprised, when they read the stats and read the news and then see the incidents repeating themselves, that in such a, advanced society in the 21st century, that let's face it, the rest of the world sees the United States as an empire, not just a country. I mean, Americans don't like to hear that we are an empire, but the rest of the world views the United States as an empire. And when they see that this country is failing at the basic level, which is public safety and security, protecting children in schools, protecting the average citizen from going to a festival, or movie goers from being gunned down, and seeing on TV and seeing the discussion how attached are politicians and the way they interpret the Second Amendment, that this is more important to them because of the NRA, because of the lobby groups in Washington, D.C., to continue on the same, I would say, disastrous path.
Well, I would call it homicidal path.
And not put the interest of the public. I think this is a major surprise.
So Europeans can't wrap their mind around it.
They just we understand, they come to in the discussion, we understand people like to hunt, but do you hunt with a machine gun and an AK-47? I mean, people will pose questions like this to kind of stump you because it's undefendable. I mean, of course, you and I are totally against it, but even for someone who supports the Second Amendment, they say, do you need an AK-47 to hunt? How did a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old get hold of these guns? How did they, these questions you cannot answer, and then when they look at the numbers, we have 380 million guns
for
on the street.
320 million people.
It's astonishing. So this is the big issue, and of course, I think they're not amused any longer. I believe, because I travel every time and I talk to people. People were initially kind of amused by Donald Trump. They thought he's a silly guy. He says what's on his mind, and that's part of his popularity. But I think now they're viewing him as a dangerous guy.
Oh, that's good.
And I think there is a shift.
That's
There's
accurate.
a shift. Especially, he has insulted almost everyone in Europe anyways. He has insulted the former prime minister of the England.
Yes.
He has insulted the
Angela Merkel.
Yeah. He has insulted the French president. I mean, you name it. It's not like he is loved. I mean, it's beyond now amusement. And then they also see, also they have their own issues. They have, the Brexit, they have the economy. And so a global recession, which you are talking about, and where the United States has a lot of say in this, affects their lives. So they are also very worried
As they should
and
be.
very nervous.
As they should be.
And watching our elections very closely, watching what's going on here, because they know that this is going to reflect on them as well.
Well, that's very interesting to hear, Jamal, because it seems like the Europeans have a much more sobering and maybe even accurate analysis about what's happening in this country than many Americans. So I'm heartened to hear that they have this kind of analysis about what's happening here. And I think that analysis is not just European. I think it's true in Africa. I think it's true in Central and South America.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's true in Australia. I think it's true in Asia. We have a president of the United States who believes in Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin. He believes in thugs. One of his best friends is MBS. We didn't even talk about MBS today, when in fact there's plenty to talk about. I should let our listeners know that we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You had posted that video, 20 million views of the clown. Facebook did take it down, and they haven't reinstated it yet. So I just think in the spirit of transparency and kind of freedom of speech and, First Amendment rights, I'm still a little disturbed by that. But it seems like, back to my point, Jamal, that most of the world has a much more sobering, worrisome view of what's happening.
Well,
in
look
this
what
country.
happened in New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand had one catastrophe, one, of course, horrific and heinous mass shootings, and then they were able to pass laws prohibiting semi-automatic weapons.
Right.
I forgot the number, but they had a call for people to
And people
an amnesty,
they brought them
to bring
in.
their guns. They brought their guns, surrendered thousands of weapons, and they passed strict laws. And here in this country, every time something like this happens, we have these debates. It's kind of endless debates that amount to nothing, just condemnations.
Well, I have
and
two words.
People are crying on television.
I have two
and
words,
we
Bob.
are...
It's two words.
We feel very emotional about it.
There's only one reason.
And it only lasts for a few days, and then something similar happens.
There's only one reason, Jamal, we don't have the most basic background check law. The most basic, simplistic thing we can do is make sure every time you buy a gun, there's a background check. That's it doesn't solve everything, but it's a good first step. The only reason we don't is two words.
What are they?
Moscow Mitch.
Moscow Mitch.
Which I sometimes refer to him as machine gun
He wasn't
Mitch.
hiding. He hasn't. Did he show up back in
No.
the Senate?
No, he is not.
Has he?
Children.
politicians-
Listen. Children are dying every day at gun violence, and he's still in Kentucky. Well, we've come to the end of another great show here on Arab Talk. You can follow us at ArabTalkRadio.com, where you can catch all of our podcasts. Go to Jamal's Facebook page, Jamal Dajani 2. Send us emails at ArabTalk@kpo.com. Jamal, I guess we'll see everybody next week.
We will see you all next week.